Assalamu alaikum, good evening everyone, hope you're well. Mr. Ali here, we're just about to go live on air in a few minutes time. So today we have another fantastic show for you, and we have our local inspector Amir Abid, who's come into the studios to talk about some of the challenges and priority that they have, but also more importantly how we as a community can help them to go about their job safely and successfully as well. So that's the nature of the show. If you have got any questions, if you've got any comments, please, as always, the studio number is 0121 682 9735. Alternatively, you're more than welcome to post your comments, and we'll make sure that we will read them out and put them forward to Inspector Amir Abid. Is it okay to call you Amir? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Hope everyone is well and keeping safe. Thank you. Walaikum salam, Pops. How you doing? Hope all is well. Yeah, keep up the great work that you're doing as well. So we got our local inspector in today. So if you've got any questions about engagement, about anything that you are feeling that the community should pass their comments on to the police, then who better than your local inspector? So coming to you from the studios of Radio Aapki Awaaz. We're ready to go. Assalamu alaikum, good evening. My name is Mr. Ali. I'm coming to you from the studios of live from the studios of Radio Aapki Awaaz every Tuesdays between the hours of 8 to 9 p.m. So continue to listen on www.aapkiawaaz.co.uk. You can also hear us on TuneIn Radio and Radio Garden apps as well. Today we have none other than the local inspector, Amir Abid, who is going to come in and help me talk about the local policing here within Washwood Heath and Hodge Hill. So please, if you've got any questions for the inspector, then please, the studio number is 0121 682 9735. Alternatively, please, if you want to, please continue to put your comments on Facebook, then we will endeavour our best to pass them on to Amir as well. So first of all, a huge welcome to our humble studios. Thank you for taking time out. And bearing in mind, Inspector has just finished a mammoth 12-hour shift, and for him to come straight into our studios is a testament to Inspector Amir's character, really. So before, as always, I think it's worth touching and putting into perspective the local R rate and what the infection rates are for Birmingham. So this week, there has been another increase of approximately 31 cases of people passing away from COVID. So positive cases for Birmingham, and there are now 302 cases per 100,000. But Birmingham isn't the only city here within West Midlands that is doing appallingly with their transmission rate. If you look at Wolverhampton, Walsall and Sandwell, they are also in the 300s as well. So all in all, there's still, a lot more work that needs to be done by the local community in order for us to ensure that this lockdown, the second lockdown, is successful as well. We've had some good news, especially yesterday, about Pfizer being very close to have their vaccine license, and their success rate in terms of people that were vaccinated who are then infected from COVID-19 was as high as 90%. Normally vaccines have a success rate of anything between 50, 60, 70%, depending on what the type of vaccine is. So hopefully now in the new year, the government have already ordered millions of stock in anticipation of when it is licensed. Hopefully we are now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So, walaikum salam everyone. We will definitely get your questions on to Inspector Amir. So, first of all, I'm going to, if that's okay, talk about specifically about the compliance of people around COVID. So we know that there is a lockdown and that no one is able to visit another person's house, not even their garden as well. However, we've seen now from only the weekend that someone went to someone's house and he went there only for a brew, for a cup of tea, and somehow the police got informed and they knocked on the door and he casually said, "Oh, I'm here for a cup of tea with my friend." You know, he was feeling a bit lonely. There's still a lot of misinformation, a lot of miscommunication, lack of knowledge and awareness about what the do's and the don'ts are. From your point of view, Inspector, you've had a couple of incidents, not you personally, but in the police force, whereby people have ventured into superstores, shops without a mask, and now if they persist in shopping, it is a punishable offence through a fine and potentially even a caution. What are you finding, Inspector? Are people going into shops out of and without a mask, just forgetting, or is there due negligence and they are doing it willfully? What are your thoughts about that, Inspector?
First of all, assalamu alaikum to all the listeners, and thank you for having me on the show. So, I mean, we're into the first week of lockdown. On the whole, compliance has been quite good. That being said, there are some things where people are not clear on. So, things, for example, wearing a mask, that's required. It's required when you go out, when you go into work, on public transport, certainly within shops, shopping for essential services. And if you don't have a mask, then a lot of the stores have been quite good in terms of demonstrating that, advertising that, and making people aware of their requirement to wear a mask. Clearly, if people persist in not wearing a mask, then they are liable to be issued a fixed penalty notice. Should they fail to pay that, then they could end up in court and potentially end up with a conviction.
And also the wearing of mask is where you're not only protecting yourself, but you are protecting all the other people that may be within your vicinity. So I think you have a civic duty, you have a public health duty to play your part in ensuring that you are wearing a face mask. I would even say when you are venturing out of your front door, really, whether you're using public transport, whether you're using a taxi, or whether you are going into a crowded space, I think, as they say, wear a face mask, not only for yourself, but also for, because you don't know that the person not too far from you may well be, having some sort of respiratory condition, some sort of health condition. They may be elderly. So for their sake, I think you should wear a face mask and look after each other. We have to do this together.
No, absolutely. And, even with us, we're not immune to COVID. Police officers, we're also subject to the same guidelines. And, for some people can work from home. Due to the nature of what we do, we unfortunately can't work from home. So therefore, even within our police buildings, we've had to do risk assessments. And something that we've brought in is that unless you're sitting at your desk, you have to wear a face mask, whether that's in communal areas, in refreshment rooms, in kitchens, in corridors. So even internally, we're heavily promoting it and enforcing it. So absolutely, the request is, if you're going out, then if you're in public transport, if you're in the shopping premises, shopping for essential services, please keep a mask on.
Absolutely, and the legislation is clear that if you are also exempt, then obviously have some sort of certificate. It's always nice just to sort of show someone. It just diffuses the situation, and they know that you are on exemption ground, that you don't have to wear a face mask. And the other one also is the one that really caught my eye was before we go to some of the the viewers' comments really, has been the case about the retired nurse who went to see her mum in a nursing care home, and I think she was being neglected. She didn't have a haircut for 7 months, and they, in their wisdom, thought we're going to take her home and look after her, which is not the right thing to do. We understand that, but I personally just thought as though the police could have sort of, dealt with it a bit more sensitively. But at this time, with the heightened tension of everything, I think the public need to play their part, but also I think the police also have to work with the community to make sure that we get through this difficult period.
Absolutely, and what we've previously had the 4E approach in terms of how we're going to deal with COVID breaches. So the first E being that we're going to engage with people to first of all try to ascertain, what is it that's causing to lead to this potential breach. We'd then explain the legislation to the people and actually the impact it has on the communities, the individual, the pressures on the NHS and other services as well, and then we'd encourage them to comply with regulations and then go to enforcement as a last resort. But I think given the time that the regulations have been in place, we've all had time to adjust to them, get used to them. Certainly, as a direction from officers, is that we will be going to enforcement a lot quicker than we have done previously.
Sure. I'm going to go straight to some of the comments now. There's quite a few people giving you salams and watching. So, Muhammad Ace, Pops Hussain, Walaikum Salam. Sardar Farzand Ali Dogar, how are you? Walaikum Salam. Raja Zia Khan, Chaudhry Rizzi, Harun Chuktai, giving you salam and watching. Walaikum Salam. We also have Shiroz Shawani, how are you? Hope you're well. Muhammad Ayub. And Pops Hussain has got a first question. We will come on to this. I'll just read them out so we make a note of it. Could you ask them about what they're doing about knife crime that is going and spiraling out of control, as well as gun crime? So we'll just park that. We'll come back to that if that's okay, Pops. Al Hamain, Adrian, how are you? Hope you're well. Nasby Centre, hope you're doing well. Amjad Mirza, Walaikum Salam. Maqsood, how you doing? MashaAllah, Walaikum Salam. Councillor Majid, I've seen your video today, Majid, from one of your residents in Hodge Hill. And he's saying over the last few months, we've had a number of catalytic converters stolen from vehicles, some in broad daylight, and they've done it in very brazen. The floodlight went off, the security went off, and they still, calmly went about and took it off from our streets and car parks, such as Stretchford Retail Park. And last night in Hodge Hill, there was a particular incident. I just mentioned that, Majid, causing a damage to the car, probably around £300 to repair. We need a region-wide task force to tackle these thugs before there's a serious injury, tackle the scrap metal merchants as well, and have a zero tolerance approach. Chaudhry is saying, how do I report a neighbour who's mixing with other households on the road? So I'm going to actually go on to that last comment by Zahir Akbar, who's part of Al Amra Community Forum, really, who does some fantastic work. So, we were talking about, what the community can do in order to make sure we comply with the lockdown and reduce our transmission rate. But I want to touch on that last comment if I can. How do I report a neighbour who's mixing with other households on the road?
Okay, what I can do at the end of the show, I can leave you some links and some contact details, but it's relatively straightforward to do. Instead of having to call 999 or 101, you can do it easily online. So there's specific link which takes you through to wanting to report an individual or reporting a business. So I can share those links at the end.
Fantastic. I hope that satisfies your answer. I'm going to allow you to also touch on Councillor Majid's point, because the rest we will discuss during the course, but that specific one around catalytic converters, and I saw the video as well, and how brazen they were. It's almost like they were just nonplussed about being caught or seen.
It's not being brought to my attention in terms of as being as part of a series or a problem that's occurred over a significant period of time. I don't know the specific incident he's talking about, but happy to take the details of how many thefts we've had of specifically catalytic converters. And clearly, if it's identified as being picked up as part of a series, then our full CRD team can look into a series.
No, most definitely. We talked about how individuals can play their part in ensuring that they comply comply with the lockdown rules and the national guidance, but also organizations, you're looking at hospitality sectors, you're looking at, restaurants, they also have a part to play. We know a number of venues have openly now had held private functions where it exceeded, 200-300 people having parties, having shisha parties. Not only that, but also funerals as well. And a number of venues have been fined as well. So how often are you sort of seeing, private parties being, breaking the rules, and how strict is your enforcement? And is that, just one or two that are grabbing the local headline news, or is this something that you're seeing on a regular basis? Venues that are sort of breaking the lockdown rules?
Clearly, there's going to be times when premises do break them, which is why we need to urge the public to come and report it. Thankfully, so far in the week that I've been, since the new lockdown has come into place, we've not had any significant breaches. But I'm sure you've read the news where on different areas we've had, for example, a couple of shisha places which have been fined. So in the first instance, they can be fined. Breaches continue, then they can be closed down by environmental health as well. So it's something that absolutely we're taking serious, that we are going to enforce, and the message is quite clear: we need to comply. If not, then we will come in and close you down. And just I'm dedicating a significant number of my officers on a daily basis to ensure COVID compliance. So it is a priority for us, and we are absolutely going to still maintain the 4E approach, but we're going to move to enforcement a lot quicker than we have done previously.
And you know what? The police are taking this seriously. There was one particular shisha bar who actually had 150 people having a private shisha under, closed conditions. It was a private function, and they got fined £10,000 within a week. And for some strange reason, they were doing the same thing again the week after, and their license was withdrawn. So, for those out there, if you are thinking about having, private shisha parties, or, any kind of raves, or, in a pub, or, wherever it may be, think about, you may be young, and you think that is, this COVID may not be affecting you, but when you go back home, when you mix with your family, especially, within the BAME community, we live in a structured family system where we may have multi-generational people. We also have a number of, long-term health conditions. We have a responsibility, make sure that we don't pass on any kind of condition that will help their long-term welfare. So think about the wider civic duty to your loved ones, when you are going to such illegal organizations and welfare, because, there is no social distancing. People are hugging and sort of mixing with each other quite openly as well. So anything you want to add before we move the conversation on to more local issues, Inspector Ahmed?
No, just a reminder, the vast majority of people are compliant. In the first period of lockdown, we did shut down premises, a number of premises, including snooker halls, including shops that shouldn't have been open. So, we've done it previously, and, and certainly if we see non-compliance, then we will shut those down again.
Yeah, no, absolutely, most definitely. And Majid's come back as well, and he's given you some data, actually. If I can maybe just read that out. What Majid is saying is that 800 catalytic converters stolen last year, 2019, from the West Midlands. So this is obviously something that's in a bit of an... we're talking about epidemics and pandemics. This certainly seems to be in that category. There was only 80 in 2018. So something certainly has shifted in 2019. I think there's been more than 800 already in 2020.
So that's across the force. How local that is to Birmingham, I'm not too sure. But Majid's got my number, I've got his, and we can have a conversation during the week.
So Majid, you've had that offer, so please take it up with Inspector Ahmed, and he will obviously give it the necessary due care and attention to get that resolved as well. So thank you. So we're going to bring the matters to a close to more locally, but before we do that, how has the last 7-8 months been for you personally, but also for the local police? How has it been patrolling and meeting residents? This is unprecedented time. You've not probably envisaged, policing in this sort of environment, this sort of situation. How has it been? The community, understanding the situation and working with you, or do you feel there's a them and us situation?
It's been difficult. I think it's unprecedented times. It's not something everybody that's experienced something like this, certainly within our lifetime, and it's probably unlikely we'll experience something like this again. So I think what we were seeing is significant compliance initially to start off with. I think second time round, potentially people are getting some degree of COVID fatigue. But from a personal perspective, I've had officers go off sick. I've had teams having to isolate. I'm aware of family members of some of my staff who have been impacted and passed away as well. So, and I mean, what it has impacted on us certainly is in terms of our engagement, being able to go out and about and engage with communities that we'd want to do. Clearly, it's impacted on that. But we've had to look at other options, whether that's virtual meetings, starting a digital kin network. So it's been difficult, but at the same time, it gives us an opportunity to explore engagement in a different sort of way as well.
No, absolutely. I think on behalf of myself, Radio Aapki Awaaz, the wider community, Armagh Community Forum, in fact, also on behalf of Majid Mahmood as well, we just take our hats off to you, really. The fact that you're on the front line, and anyone that's on the front line, they get, more adversely and disproportionately affected as a result of COVID. And we just want to sort of, tip our hat really to your bravery really and your courage. So I just want to echo something that Majid sort of just said, in these challenging times. And the other thing, if I can just roll you back about the people that were breaking these social distancing in terms of organisations and venues. The venues have been sort of fined £10,000, but we've also seen a number of venues whereby the people that were sort of taking part in those activities were simply allowed out without any kind of, I don't know whether they were, maybe the details were taken inside and they were fined, but you just looked at those from the video from the news that they were just being let out without any kind of caution or fine. But, is that the norm, or do you think they would have been fined as well as a venue?
I've not known the full details. I wouldn't really know. I wouldn't really, but I suppose depends on the incident at that time. If the priority is actually emptying the place out, and it's going to be measured against actually how many officers we have versus how many people are at the venue. But like I said, our stance is very much different now. It's going to be enforcement.
No, that's fine. Thank you for that, Inspector Amir. Now we're going to bring the conversation a bit more local. We are at the heart of Alam Rock, Borsley Green, Washwood Heath, Hodge Hill, and you've been you're an inspector now for a period of how many months now?
I've been an inspector for 2.5 years.
No, sorry, for this...
just coming up to nearly 18 months.
Or 18 months now. So you're well familiar with the sort of day-to-day encounters and problems that the residents and the businesses are facing. We're going to touch on those. So before we go on to individuals, and there's already been a number of comments on, from your point of view, what are your priorities? What are the challenges that you're facing, and what crimes are the ones that are really keeping you awake at night?
Okay, so I mean, first lockdown brought about it with a significant amount of reduction in total recorded crime. The challenges we face this time around is that crime levels have now gone back to pre-COVID levels. So we've naturally now seen an increase in crime, and I suppose the biggest crime increase that we've seen is domestic violence.
Oh wow!
So we've seen nearly a 50% increase in domestic violence. That's across all 4 wards. So I have responsibility for Shard End, Hodge Hill, Borsley and Washwood. So consistently across all 4 wards, we've seen nearly 50% increase in
I just want to repeat that if I can. So over the last few months now,
so from April to now, 50% increase.
So since April now, when lockdown was sort of at its height, to now, there has been an increase in domestic violence, domestic abuse by a staggering 50%. And these are sort of things that we don't hear about. I would have thought parking, knife crime, drugs, antisocial behavior, these sort of things are the top. But from our local inspector, it is domestic violence that are really causing them sleepless nights as well. So tell us more, because, we don't, in our interactions with our family, friends, it doesn't come in the conversation. We don't hear about it.
It is. It can be a bit of a taboo subject, but to offer a bit more context, that 50% increase translates to roughly 1 in 4 crimes. So for nearly 25% of all total recorded crime within the constituency is domestic violence. So we use the word domestic violence, but there's also domestic abuse. So that's not necessarily just physical violence. That encompasses a whole heap of other things like financial abuse, emotional abuse, controlling coercive behaviour, harassment. It's not just interfamilial. It's not partner and partner. It can be siblings, it can be extended family, it can be children and parents. It can be a whole multitude of things. If you include throw in their forced marriage, there's a whole multitude of things which come under.
Okay, I think that puts it into perspective now, because I know because of lockdown, a lot of people were, under each other's feet. People were furloughed. People were really stressed out and worried about their financial position. So everything was really heightened, and not that it's an excuse. Absolutely, God forbid, no. So this also is when children, and I'm seeing, and I'm hearing a lot more about this, whereby children are abusing their grandparents or their parents, and it maybe start off with shouting or slamming the door, to maybe even sort of pushing them or shoulder barging them, and it wouldn't even enter my head. But the next generation maybe not so respectful of their parents as well. I know Islam, we say that the heaven is underneath our mother's feet. That just gives an explanation of how we value our mothers. But like I said, I think that sense has really been lost on some people as well. And the other thing you also mentioned was maybe sibling versus sibling. The thing that I want to touch on is which I've also heard, and is ignored, is the woman battering their male partner or their male husband. Is that something that you've seen or not?
Yeah. It's a big misconception to say domestic abuse only works one part. We see it, yes, the other way around. We see it in same-sex couples as well. So we see it across the whole spectrum. But regardless of what kind of relationship it is, it's unacceptable.
Absolutely. So I just want to, if you are suffering in silence at all, there are helplines out there, least of all, you've got the local police, you've got other women's refuges, while you've got social services. If you want to private messages, we will also provide you with the necessary support. So please don't suffer in silence as well.
It's one of our biggest priorities. We prioritise the arrest of outstanding domestic abuse suspects. We've got a specialist department. We've got the Public Protection Unit. There's a dedicated unit, which is a domestic abuse unit. We've got specialist safeguarding officers. So we can put all we need is when people are victims or they're aware of another victim, come forward, speak to us, and speak to us, and we can put around that wraparound support and offer the safeguarding.
Absolutely, thank you for that. We're going to sort of move the conversation on. So if you want to come on anonymously if you wish to. The studio number is 0121 682 9735. Please don't be shy. Come on and speak to Inspector Amir directly as well, courtesy of Radio Aapki Awaaz. There's plenty of questions and comments are coming on Facebook. Keep on getting them through. One of the real things that people do associate with inner city and urban areas is knife crime. You have your country lines. You also have gun crime, which is we're seeing more and more, which is related to the number one thing that is everyone's forefront of their minds is drugs. This is almost like now going on for generations upon generations. It's almost like we have just like the cat trying to get its tail. We're just sort of going round in circles. Where are we at? Are we really denting those big drug dealers out there, or do you feel that this is a losing battle? What's your initial gut reaction?
I mean, tackling drugs is certainly a local priority. Absolutely is. So, I mean, what I urge people is come forward and tell us who's dealing, when are they dealing, what vehicles are they using, what times a day. And what my teams then can do is work and develop that intelligence. They can turn that intelligence into warrants, and then from warrants, we can take some enforcement action. We've taken significant amount of enforcement action over the past year. Highlight being we raided a cannabis factory with nearly £1 million worth of cannabis in there. We've taken some significant weapons off the streets. We've recovered £1,000 worth of drugs. But we've only been able to do that on the back of intelligence which is coming from the community, because ultimately it's the community that know what's happening, when it's happening, who's doing it. And I just urge, feed that intelligence in. That intelligence can come in via Crime Stoppers. At the end of the show, like I said, I can leave my details. I can leave the email addresses of my 4 wards and my 4 sergeants. So there's lots of various different ways in which intelligence can be fed in. I
tell you what really concerns me is, when you, I'm sure you may have heard or seen the clips whereby there was a open gang-on-gang knife incident where a number of young people were stabbed, and then we hear that there was some sort of retaliatory action by shooting at someone who was standing at their doorstep, when they knocked the door, is that, we could really do with maybe, when arrests are made, really making a big song and dance about it. So we know that the police have worked extremely hard to arrest those perpetrators, and something's being done. And I think sometimes we see the incidents without knowing what the end result is. What are your thoughts about just, having, some sort of official kind of a platform where you do give us the good news as well, and and not everyone's on social media.
That's a very valid point you make, and one of the things we do need to certainly do is promote our good work a lot more, because a lot of times when incidents kick off, crack off, whatever you want to term it, there's lifetime investigations, so how much we can share at that time is a little bit limited. If it goes to the CJ outcome, with criminal justice outcome, it could take several months before an outcome. So yeah, we do share that. We share that on our tweet. We share it on WM now. So it's a plug to say if people want to get in touch, keep in touch with us regularly. I can appreciate not everybody's on Twitter, but WM now is like a platform where what I ask my sergeants to do is on a weekly basis to send out an email to their residents to inform them what their team have been doing over the past week. So as part of that, then they can get updated in a more timely fashion. But you're right. I mean, we had a meeting with Alan Community Forum myself last week, and it is something that we've made huge technological advances, and one of the main things forums in which we do communicate is online and social media. But yeah, there are gaps in terms of that doesn't reach everybody, and that's something as an able inspector I'm really keen to work on in terms of bridging those gaps and reaching out to as many people as we can.
Yeah, excuse me. For those of you that aren't familiar with WM now, it is a communication messaging that the police uses to disseminate any kind of instructions, guidance, any kind of updates in terms of crime or those people that have been punished about some incidents, and that's done on a daily or on a example basis. And I suppose from those people that want to get those updates, how would they go about signing up to it?
I can leave the details as well in terms of how you can go about signing up and then receiving. It's like literally an email system. It's a messaging system with the emails. It can be a two-way thing as well, so you can respond to messages as well. I'd certainly urge your listeners, if they have access, please sign up to WM now for their local area.
No, most definitely. And also, what we have seen is over the last period of maybe 5 or 6 years is certainly, the whole community is now, feeling as though there's no such thing as society. I know Cameron was talking about one big society. It's all about, people are living as individuals, going about their business, and there's a real lack of cohesion, especially with the different communities that have come in. I think one thing that doesn't help, Inspector Ahmed, is a real mushroom of HMOs that have been licensed and been granted permission to operate, where you have, strangers coming into a community in huge numbers. We've got no real stake, no understanding of the community, and we've seen, some people, not appreciating this influx of numbers. What are your thoughts? Is there anything that we can do to stop HMOs coming and blighting some of our areas? And is there a link between HMOs and crime being either on the increase or decrease?
I think it's probably fair to say, we probably have disproportionately more crime within HMOs than we have in other places. That's just my professional judgment in terms of what I've seen. But certainly I don't think we have as many HMOs, certainly within Hodgill, compared to other parts of the city. But I know that's another ongoing discussion in terms of what that means, what's HMO, the legislation behind it, the enforcement behind it. Yeah.
So I know the council have, over the last year, just made it a bit more difficult now for people to simply get granted a HMO license. And, certainly I know a lot of residents are, don't appreciate HMOs coming in. And by and large, it is young, males that come in as well. So I think that's a concern for a lot of people. So thank you for that. Now, so just widen the conversation on now in terms of, The other sort of people's concern is about parking now. We know each household has maybe numerous cars now, simply because we mentioned about in some of the inner city areas, you have Asians, 9, 10 people living in a house. Unfortunately, the way house prices are, not everyone is able to afford to move out. So you got 3, 4 cars per household, and there's limited spaces. And people are now, having to park maybe even 2, 3 streets away, double park. A lot of these streets now, Edmund Road, Ellesmere Road, and so on. It's a one-way system, and people will simply park in the middle of the road and just go to sleep. I'm just thinking, if there's an emergency vehicle or an ambulance, sometimes it's really difficult. I suppose, what can we do? Is this a civil matter? Can the police get involved? What would you suggest is a nice way, an amicable way of resolving maybe parking issues between neighbours and residents?
Yeah, parking, it's a common problem, not just isolated to Hodghill, to various other places. It's difficult. It's not solely the police's responsibility. We have a part to play in that, but so do the local authority and the council and the highways as well. But equally, the public can play their part as well. So, when we're talking about priorities, clearly parking's a local priority for a lot of my teams. But when I've got to balance parking against, like some references you made to some of the discharges or some of the knife incidents, and when I've got to allocate my resources, I've got to do it on a threat harm risk basis. Yeah. So yes, absolutely, we will go out and enforce parking, but I've got to balance it with the other priorities as well. So yes, so we will go out and we will blitz some of the problem areas. So one of the things people can do, if they sign up to WM now, or they email the ward accounts, where are the problem locations? Yeah, if it's a regular occurrence, then yeah, we can help go and enforce that. We've been in contact certainly with the local authority to get council wardens out to come and support us there, because it's equally the council and the highways responsibility to come and enforce it as well. But one initiative certainly, like my Bawdsey Green team have been pushing, is Operation Park Safe, where as a member of the public you can take two pictures of a vehicle, then you can email it in to us, and then we can do like a remote prosecution for that parking offence. Once again, details on that for that I can leave with you at the end of the show.
Yeah, please.
You can circulate it to your followers and your listeners. We've had great uptake for it, certainly within Bawdsey Green. So I think when we can do our bit, the council can do their bit, public can do their bit, and together hopefully we'll make a dent in it.
You know what, we talk about quality of life, and the inconvenience really, and the inconsideration. People are parking literally on junctions, on pathways. The whole car will be on a pathway, leaving little or no room for a disabled chair to be passed, or a pushchair to be passed. The neighbours are, there's real tension there, and they've asked the Aldermot Community Forum, the council, to do something about it. And it's nice to know that as residents, what the council, the police are trying to also do is empower you as well. They've given you the mechanism to simply, we've all got mobile phones, take a number of pictures and upload it onto the appropriate council site. And also, as Inspector Amir said, he will also give us the website where we can upload it, and then you leave it into the authorities to deal with it, and if they see enough evidence, they will fine the vehicle owner as well for illegal or inconsiderate parking as well. So that is something that we as residents can do. The other also issue is that Zahir is mentioned, and I know it's like a one-man crusade that he's, you have those zigzags outside schools during the drop-off period, and literally people are sort of parking on those zigzags, on those yellow lines, and making it really hazardous for not only school children who are obviously going into school with their parents, but for also other passing traffic as well. And I know you can't be there everywhere, but what can we do? How can we get the school, the parents, the police, the council to work in cohesion to eradicate this safety issue?
What we can do is certainly, and I know we're pushing for it in Bawdsey Green, is promote some of the car-free zones that have been trialled in other parts of the city, in which actually we have periods of where actually no cars are allowed to be dropped off. With it, you know what, it brings about to it the benefits in terms of walking to school, less congestion, and actually eliminate some of the issues that you're talking about. I think longer term, that's probably one of the better solutions. I think.
Yeah. And I want to sort of mention this stretch of road, just the junction of Sladefield Road, Washwood Heath Road. That's really a hive of activity, and just some of the parking there. It's just bordering on negligible, and people are literally parking on the zigzags where there's traffic lights and where there's corners, and it's a real hazard issue. And as Scott said, we've seen people parking there, and police literally drive past, and they haven't got their blues and twos on, and I suppose it's about zero tolerance really. If you can show that we're not going to accept any kind of illegal sort of behaviour, then hopefully it start filtering through to the wider community. But if you let small things like this pass, then even the bigger things sometimes get under the radar. So he's asking, why do the police just go past some obvious crime like parking on zigzags on a traffic light?
Okay, without knowing the context of that specific thing, but just because we don't have our blue lights flashing doesn't mean we're not responding to an emergency incident. So it could be a number of reasons. It could be actually we're dealing with an incident, we're trying to get somewhere, which doesn't need the use of our lights. It may be the driver's actually not qualified to drive that vehicle, or it may be equally we're doing something which actually is going to take a bigger priority. Maybe that we've got to go and relieve somebody on the scene. It may be we need to go somewhere to do a knife sweep, and we need to go research it. So it's about not turning a blind eye. Absolutely, I'd expect my officers, if they're driving past and they see something, they will always get out and deal with that incident. But it's just having context where I get the public may not fully understand what the officers are doing when they're driving past. Just because we haven't got our lights on doesn't necessarily mean we're not responding. So just trying to offer a bit of context around that.
No, that's fine. Thank you. So, Askar, if you want to come back, then by all means do. But I think, as the inspector said, sometimes we don't know the concept or the background behind where they go into. So, but yeah, fair enough point. And I think inspectors answered that. The other sort of, we normally have a break at this time, but because there's so many questions and comments coming through, I'm going to keep on going really. So if that's okay. The other thing that is, again, may not be a high on the police issue, but certainly for the community is, again, we talked about, when you have a hotspot where it's renowned for fly tipping, normally when it's clear, it's fine. You only need one bag. And that will encourage and attract a lot more people to start thinking, yeah, it's okay for us to start putting our rubbish on there. This is normally a civic and a council issue, but is there something that the police can do? So if they see someone or someone gives you the information, is that something that you can get involved with, or do you think it's more of a council issue and the enforcement is...
Fly tipping is an offence, and it is an issue, but it's enforced by the council, is prosecuted by the council. Similar to the Park Save initiative, there's an app called Fix My Street, where people can similarly take pictures, upload it, and the benefits of Fix My Street, it gets logged, but the case can also be tracked through as well.
No, most definitely. And I think, I think the council need to sort of have a look at this, because the amount of time they've been asked to come in and pick up fly tipping and rubbish, because I don't know if you remember about 6-7 years ago, before austerity, the council allowed us to have 3 or 4 bulky waste collections per year per resident, per household, and that worked a treat. So when you had, a large house clearance, or when new tenants moved in or they moved out, just give them a call and they would come in. And it was a bit more, and it was a bit more organised, a bit more structured. Hereby, they're still doing that, but it's just that, people are sort of having to report it, and they're sort of coming in. I just think that, I think this policy needs to be sort of looked at again as well. So that's just something that we talked about. Just going to sort of break it up now, and something that's really sort of sprung, I suppose, the last few years, especially when austerity sort of came about, was the blight of people begging on street corners. Initially, it was, restricted to city centre. But over the last 3-4 years now, it's started to disseminate, and now any high street, whether it's Alum Rock, Soho Road, Ladypool, Errington, wherever there's a traffic light, wherever there's a roundabout, there's like makeshift, there's makeshift tents. It's like, it's only a world, and people sleep there, and which is not a nice situation for them. And I suppose, sometimes, normally they're very polite, they ask you for money and when you say no, they won't trouble you. But there have been examples, Inspector, whereby, if you haven't, they say something to you, or the provocation, and there have been some standoffs and some sort of rapport between citizens and these beggars as well. And obviously, they're there and for everyone to see. Simple question: why can't the police arrest them or get them to move on?
I think we can. I'd be keen to find out where the problem locations are, because it's not simply about arresting people. So some people have other needs, when there's interventions we need to put in place in terms of rehabilitation, finding out the source of actually what's causing the issues. So yeah, arresting is one option, but actually trying to meet the needs of that individual is preferable thing to turn them away from begging. But equally, I get there's some people who are going to make a career out of it and they're going to be persistent beggars. But for them, there's other options we can look at in terms of CBOs and longer term orders, in terms so that we can get
CBO?
Criminal behaviour orders in order to enforce and get bigger sanctions in terms of committing offences.
I'll tell you what's a real hotspot is, where this TSB bank is opposite Edmund Road. I think that's a real hotspot. The cash machines there, people are going in, and they're always, they're not rude or anything. We had a couple of incidents ourselves as well at Armagh Community Forum about 2-3 years ago. But lately, the person that are sort of normally there, they are good, but they're there. And not like I said, we wish them well, and I support they need mental health support. They need the council and social services to come in and give them the structure and the support they need. But it's just something that, I know a lot of women, especially at this time where the nights are, roughly drawing, going early around 4 o'clock, is something that's a real concern.
No, you're right. We need a longer term solution in terms of joined up multi-agency pathway support referrals, because what we don't want to do is just displace. We want to get to the root of the problem and help that individual to turn their lives around.
Yeah, a message by one of our listeners on ARCF is Tyra Khan. Obviously we had the bonfire night last week, and even though because of lockdown, there wasn't actually a bonfire night, but people still bought huge amount of fireworks for them to release from there and discharge from their gardens. But what I am seeing over the last few years, Inspector, is I don't know where they're getting it from, is holding the, and these are like almost mini rockets now, mini bazookas, holding it and firing it at cars that are driving past, and also letting it off into people's letterboxes, more dangerously, going into a random takeaway shop and just letting them go. And like I said, it's only for the almighty. We haven't seen a serious injury. But, have you had any, people being injured, and have you seen a real...
Thankfully not, and I think I know what the incident they're alluding to, which happened in the western side up towards Smith. Yeah, and it was concerning, and last thing we want to do is incidents like this. But what we do have, we have seasonality planning, so there's a number of things that we had put in place in terms of patrols, visits to fireworks shops, some messaging, and certainly we wouldn't tolerate behaviour like that.
And you know what? I hope that the young people out there listening, that this can be a life-threatening. If someone gets hit in the face or the eye, you are changing people's lives. And I hope if they are caught, if anything like that happens, the full weight of the law is thrown at you. For you, it may be a laugh and you're trying to impress your friends, but you are. Because I did see an article whereby a firework was let off to a schoolgirl around the Errington area, and it burnt her face here, and it was all red. And luckily, it didn't look like a severe scar. I think she got away with it. And I thought, if I was the mother or father of that child, I would have been really angry about that. So please, think about what you're doing. There's real consequences as a result.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Inspector. Just going to read out a couple of comments as well, if I can. There's quite a few people that are sort of coming in. Premises have been shot. So Javed Iqbal saying, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. Huge issue in knife and gun crime. He's talked about gangs, really. Is there a real active approach by the police to break up gangs and really, get them into education, into football clubs, try to channel their energy in a positive way? I'm going to allow you to answer that really before we move on.
Absolutely. So it sort of goes hand in hand with one of our priorities is Operation Guardian. So that's about on people under 25 committing acts of violence. So that starts off as very much as at school age. So we know we make an active effort to prioritise crime reports involving people that are under 25. And our starting point is always going to be: can we divert this person away from crime? Can we stop them turning into tomorrow's gangsters, DA perpetrators, and so forth? And it's about putting the right levels of interventions which are going to teach them some degree of self-control. There's a lot of whole heap of academic evidence which suggests actually, by instilling self-control, i.e. through sports, through martial arts, through the other reams, that helps regulate them and actually stop them from committing acts of violence. So that's something. I mean, I've got a schools-based officer. One of the things I'm pleased to say, although we've seen a rise in domestic violence, one thing we have seen is a reduction in under 25 violence. So what that means is we've identified on the board a couple of schools where we've had the most issues with. So I've got a dedicated schools officer. So that schools officer will work between those two schools. We'll work with individuals. We'll put support pathway referrals in, and as a result of that, I think we've seen something like a 20% reduction year to date in terms of under 25 violence, which is a bit of a positive. We prioritise school kicking out times between 3 and 6, where my officers will patrol kicking out times at the relevant schools, to stop offences occurring. So that's a positive. I think you've alluded to actually, gang culture and actually what's playing out at the minute. So yeah, I mean, we're all aware what happened back end of last month. It's a live investigation, or a little bit limited in terms of what I can say. But what I can say, it's a live investigation. It's with the right department investigating it. My responsibility as an neighbourhood inspector is I've been doing some proactive operations under Operation Oxeye, which is where I've been securing lots of additional force resources from ARVs, which is our armed officers, traffic unit, dog unit, our neighbourhood task force, my officers, so that we can go out and apprehend low-level dealers on the street, to provide that bit of reassurance and that visibility, and that is having some degree of impact. But once again, I'd urge people know what's happening with gangs. It's a community who have that intelligence, they have that knowledge. I just urge people to make contact via Crime Stoppers, via myself, via one of our neighbourhood teams, to let us know what is happening, because it's only through intelligence and tangible evidence that we can secure prosecutions and convictions.
Thank you, Inspector. There seems to be a gap between the community and the police, right or wrong, but there is a perception that, we can't work with the police, we can't trust them. And I suppose, we need to bridge that gap, and the more these sort of activities that you take place and put a human face to the police force, I think the better, and to share some of the good work that you are doing. Like now, inspectors just finished a 12-hour shift. They're on the front line. They've come straight here to do this show on a voluntary basis. But there's a couple of instances where, you are asking people to, give their details and where they're going and just do general inquiries. And what we have seen is where some of the police officers have been a bit heavy-handed, or because they've got a uniform and they think they've got, makes them put them on a higher sort of status, and they talk down to the individuals. And he hasn't gone down. Well, sometimes it's kicked off now, and everyone's got phone cameras now. And personally, I just felt as though, if someone like yourself, the way you're coming across, if they talked it on their level with a bit of respect, I think that would have gone a huge way of you getting the information that you required, and then sort of allowing them to carry on if there was nothing of suspicious nature or behaviour, rather than it just becoming aggravating. And again, the police then getting a bad PR, and then we're back into the same situation where it's like them and us with the police. Just thoughts about that, really.
Okay, yeah, that's disappointing to hear, but something that we all subscribe to when we join the organisation is something called Standards of Professional Behaviour and the Code of Ethics, which is what all officers subscribe to. Certainly it's what I instill in my officers, and it's true because our interaction with the public needs to be positive, because that may be the only interaction we have with the public. That being said, to give some reassurance in terms of what have we got in place where we can sort of monitor that. So we've got body-worn video. Okay, so we certainly have mandated to our officers when they they're doing a stop and search, the body worn video needs to be on. That gets reviewed by a sergeant. I will sample my officers just to ensure there's some consistency, there's some clarity, and actually, you know, our tone and our style is actually totally and wholly appropriate. We deal with that with our use of force. So that helps us identify any learning points, offer any feedback, but ensure actually, you know, we're delivering a good service, and our tone and our style is absolutely right and in the way that it should be. We've also got stop and search scrutiny panels which meet on a bi-monthly basis, which include members of the public to give us that degree of legitimacy and go through the records in more detail as well. So obviously if there's instances where we get it wrong, then you know what, there's complaints that can be made and investigations that can be launched. But on the whole, I'd like to think, you know, the vast majority of officers are professional and out there trying to keep the public safe.
And all you need is one or two bad examples just to sort of give that sort of, you know, the police force with the same brush again. I'm quite interested to pick up on what you mentioned about that sort of monthly meeting you have with your with the wider public. So just have that sort of dialogue. If anyone is interested in being part of that, what's the process, and how would they go?
Yeah, so we've got stop and search scrutiny panels. We've got focus groups. We've got task and finish groups. I think what we were probably alluding to is probably an IAG, an independent advisory group as well. Once again, I can share the details of what that process and that due diligence looks like in terms. But yeah, absolutely, you know, we welcome new people on our panels. Absolutely.
I think that the more diverse these focus groups are, including the IAG, where you have people from the ethnic minority, elderly, young people, women, the more robust that dialogue will be between yourselves and
absolutely.
the community.
We need that diverse representation, and that's ethnicity, that's colour, that's sex, that includes age, it includes experience, different cross sections of society. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to get involved, you can either get in touch with Radio Aapki Awaaz, or please get in touch and we will pass your details on to Inspector Amir. There's a couple of points here, and there's one or two that we've already covered, guys, so we're not going to go back on this, literally because we are running out of time. So Zahir, so you've been doing some fantastic work outside Lee School. I appreciate that. So he's saying that I could do with some support once in a while from the police, just to show that, that I've got some backing from the local police. So if you can assist him.
School, is it?
Lee is a primary school, and
I mean, what I'd urge is Zahir, if you want to form a street watch, I know we've got similar problems like this in Sharden, and we've got a Sharden street watch which is predominantly dealing with issues like that. So I'd urge you, if you can sign up to Street Watch.
Ifzal, thank you for joining in and your questions. You're talking about career beggars, really, and you've got to have a zero tolerance, and the process to get them removed takes months. Failure when the evidence of these daily culprits is clearly seen if you walk the street. So, Ifzal, we spent about 3-4 minutes talking about this issue. So please do rewind and go back to that again. Pops Hussein, lost all respect. This is very sad to hear, actually. Lost all respect for the police. The way I was spoken to by officer over the phone. I don't know what to say. This is what I'm saying. You only need one example, and this person now, is in their mid-40s roughly, and he's just saying that, I've lost a bit of confidence in the police. Really, it just shows that I suppose you're professional, you've had the training, and it is a highly pressurized job, but it's you've got to have that consistency and maintain it throughout. I'm
sorry to hear that. If you want to make contact directly with me to give me a bit more context in terms of what that conversation is, I can certainly look into it and offer some clarity or get some sort of resolution.
Yeah, okay, guys, we're almost into the last 5 minutes now. I'm just going to broaden the conversation, really, in terms of, we've got, it's fantastic to see a Muslim at a Pakistani at an inspector level. I've been to a couple of your events now, whereby there seems to be a real, influx of young, capable, talented people from the BME community, Muslim community, women officers as well, really coming through. And I know, especially for a Pakistani or a Muslim woman or an Indian woman, it's not, the family are very concerned for their welfare, and it's not something that they encourage. But, we've seen huge numbers. Just want to sort of allow you to sort of spend maybe a few minutes talking about your experience within the police force, and whether you experience any kind kind of racism. And the reason why I say that was it was only last year where one of your officers, a senior ranking officer, actually was, initially was let go, where he was mimicking and showing some overtly racist gestures. On appeal, he was then obviously charged and he was let go by the police. So even now in the last year, there's some examples, but for us to see, someone who's got a beard, quite overtly Muslim, for him to be flourishing in the police force, gives me confidence that, the young people that I deal with in jabs, that I can encourage them that this is a good career move for them to undertake. So just over to you.
Okay, so a little bit about me. So, I'm from Birmingham. I grew up in Sparky. I still live in Birmingham East. I went to school here. I've been in, next year will be 15 years since I joined the police. It's a very different organisation from when I joined to how it is now. We talk about, I think what you're referring to is bias and unconscious bias and things like that. I think we probably experience that in all cross sections of society, not isolated to policing. We get it in health and education, in the private sector and public sector. But I can say my own experience with the policing have been very positive. I've been given opportunities. So I've worked in a variety of roles. I've worked on response, I've had opportunities in investigations and CID, in child protection. I've had a couple of promotions. And I know things that made things easier for me. So we've got the Association of Muslim Police has been quite big support in terms of for a lot of Muslim officers. As a result of which, we've got things like prayer rooms in police stations, so I can openly, observe my prayers. We get flexibility during Ramadan as well to start later, finish later, open on Rosa. So, there's been some significant movement made towards being accepted as being a Muslim in the organisation, some adjustments and allowances to make practicing your faith, so you don't have to be somebody you don't. So anybody considering a career in the police, I certainly don't regret it. I'd urge people, absolutely come to any of the away days. We've got a positive action team who will support underrepresented groups throughout the process. It's a rewarding career. I've certainly enjoyed all my time in the police. We have some bad days, we have some really great days. It's hugely rewarding, and for me to come to Birmingham East and try giving back a little bit to my own community, having a bit of a cultural understanding of some of the issues, it's hugely rewarding. On that point, I'd just like to say we've had a new superintendent join as well. His name's Farouk Sheikh. Superintendent, one of the highest ranking Muslim officers within the force. So he's joined Birmingham East as our new superintendent, I think he'll be a real great asset to Birmingham East. I think he's quite keen to
most definitely. I'm more than happy to facilitate that request. So, that was it leads me nicely into my next question. Really, I think we've seen police officers, Muslim, Indian, BME, black, at a certain level, but there's almost like a glass ceiling. When do we actually see the next Dave Thompson, who maybe is Amir Abid or someone else, or Inderjeet Kaur?
That'll be my friend Harun Chugda.
He's either one. So so how long do you see before we get to the real, chief inspectors, the real high-ranking?
We see some of them at the minute. You look at locally, we had Baz Javid, who's now a commissioner in the Met. You've got the other people from, I think you've got Mabs Hussain as an assistant chief constable at Manchester. So I think you are seeing actually people certainly of BME background making that progress. There's still a long way to go, but I think there's a lot of work to do, long way to go, but I think we're heading in the right direction.
Guys, as always, the time has got to the best of us. I am going to read the last sort of comment. Bit of a depressing one, but I'm going to allow Inspector Ahmed to come back with a positive conclusion.
You've got to end on a positive.
Yeah, I was going to let you do the positive, but just Pops Hussain has come back, said racism will never go away, will always exist no matter what colour of your skin. So, we're hoping that, over time, when we do some of the training, the diversity training, when we break down the barriers, people get to know us and where we're from. In essence, we're all the same. We've all got the same concerns. We've all got the same challenges. And the more we collaborate, the more we mix with each other, people will realize that, there's only one, there's only one family unity. That is the humanity as well. So, I'm going to allow you to just sort of give your sort of final thoughts, if I can, Inspector.
Thank you for having me on the show. Honestly, it's been a pleasure. my key things moving forward, certainly within Washford Youth and Borders Green, I really want to improve our community engagement and our community contacts. So yeah, I'd just urge people to get in touch in terms of if they've got any ideas in terms of how we can engage with the communities better. I'm really keen to get more street watch. I want an official street watch in Washford Heath. It's the only one of my 4 wards where I don't have a street watch. Borders Green is my impact area, so it's an area of a lot of volume of crime. I'm keen to increase more representation in terms of street watchers there, so I'm really keen on people to get involved with street watch, but also equally keen in terms of how we engage. I fully get from some of the meetings I've had, online digital engagement isn't always the best way, so I'm really keen to hear people's views on that.
Inspector, the last request, we can certainly help you. And the more you have feelers on the ground level with community organisations, like Alumni Community Forum, Warden Forum, others, we can certainly do that because, there was a street patrol 3 years ago and there was the antisocial behaviour, the drug dealing, the prostitution that is now rearing its ugly head again. That was all disappeared. And it wasn't just a matter of shifting them on. We were signposting them, we were helping them, we were trying to sort of get them off their street for their own safety. And I think we need to, get the residents to, partake and form another one. So we will certainly play our part. That was the fantastic Inspector Amir Abid, who came straight from work after doing a 12-hour shift on the front line at this height of lockdown and COVID, putting their lives at risk. We've had numerous messages from the residents, from the community saying, hats off to you, to yourselves and all your team. We may be a minority voice, but it's it's something that we all think and feel it, but sometimes we don't communicate it. So do not for one moment think that you are alone in this battle. On behalf of Radio Aapki Awaaz, I hope you found it useful. Contact us directly if there's any of the support focus groups or help that Inspector Amir mentioned that you want to take up his offer. So on that note, I'm going to say this was also broadcast on Alumni Community Forum, on Radio Aapki Awaaz, on myself. All in all, thank you for dialing in, and through collaboration, through working together, can we come through this safely. Until next week, please look after yourselves and each other. God bless.